Thank you, Nina Enrique. Good evening, everyone. I'm Alma Angeles for NET25 World News. On tonight's headlines. A major trade war is looming between the U.S. and China as both sides escalate tariff threats.
With China, as you know, against my statement, they put a 34% tariff on above what their ridiculous tariffs were already. And I said if that tariff isn't removed by tomorrow at 12 o'clock, we're putting a 50% tariff on above the tariffs that we put on.
Resorting to pressure, threats and blackmail is not the right way to engage with China. China will take all necessary countermeasures to resolutely safeguard its legitimate and lawful rights and interests.
And the news starts now. A major trade war is looming between the U.S. and China as both sides escalate tariff threats. The economic fallout has triggered widespread concern about a potential global recession. Sometimes you have to take medicine to fix something, according to Trump. Let's listen in.
What's going to happen with the market, I can't tell you, but I can tell you our country has gotten a lot stronger. And eventually, it'll be a country like no other. It'll be the most dominant country economically in the world.
Is there pain in the market? At some point, you're unwilling to tolerate this idea of a Trump put. Is there a threshold?
I think your question is so stupid. I mean, I think I don't want anything to go down. But sometimes you have to take medicine to fix something.
Now, China is responding with its own dose of retaliation. Just days after President Trump dismissed market concerns, China has struck back. Beijing imposed its own tariffs on U.S. goods and announced export curbs on rare earths, a crucial resource. And President Trump is now doubling down, threatening even more punitive measures against China.
With China, as you know, against my statement, they put a 34% tariff on above what their ridiculous tariffs were already. And I said if that tariff isn't removed by tomorrow at 12 o'clock, we're putting a 50% tariff on above the tariffs that we put on. So they've gone for years. They've become a rich country because of people, again, that were in the White House that allowed this to happen. Hundreds of billions of dollars a year they'd make on us on trade, and it shouldn't be that way. And I have a great relationship with President Xi. I hope it's going to stay that way. I have great respect for China. But they can't do this.
China is vowing to fight to the end if President Trump follows through on his threat to raise tariffs on Chinese goods to 50%.
I would like to reiterate that there are no winners in a trade war or a tariff war. Protectionism offers no way out. The Chinese people do not provoke trouble, but we are not afraid of it. Resorting to pressure, threats and blackmail is not the right way to engage with China. China will take all necessary countermeasures to resolutely safeguard its legitimate and lawful rights and interests. The actions of the US side have not demonstrated any genuine willingness for serious dialogue. If the US truly wishes to engage in talks, it should adopt an attitude of equality, mutual respect and reciprocity. If it persists in disregarding the common interests of both countries and the international community and insists on escalating the trade and tariff conflict, China will, as always, fight to the end.
If neither side backs down, total new U.S. levies on Chinese goods could soar to 104% by tomorrow, putting immense pressure on Beijing. China's Commerce Ministry called Trump's threat a mistake on top of a mistake, accusing the U.S. of blackmailing. California's Chinese-American businesses are feeling the squeeze as the U.S.-China trade war shows no signs of slowing down.
As U.S. President Donald Trump trades tariff threats with Beijing, Chinese-American business owners in California say they're feeling squeezed. And importer Taylor Chow says that pain will be passed on to the restaurants and retailers that he sells ingredients to.
Soy sauce, noodles, starch, this is a basic consumer product. Day to day, they use a lot and a large volume. But you put up that much tax on it, that will jet up the price a lot. Right now the tax is 54%. Once we run out our inventory, definitely we're going to raise the price of 54%.
China, first row.
Those higher prices are coming soon, with U.S. reciprocal tariffs taking effect this week, and they may ratchet up even higher. China responded to the tariffs with its own on U.S. imports last week. Now, Trump is threatening a new 50% tariff on goods from China, on top of the 34% rolling in on Wednesday. Danny Huang owns a small grocery store lined with imported noodles, sauces, garlic, and ginger. He says he's getting ready to hike all their prices.
After this week, we might going to increase the price for those the products. I mean, those ingredients and the sauce. How much they pretend, how much will be, how much they're going to increase the price for us. You know, the tariffs increase, and then will be like, you know, we need to make up that percentage up there on the price.
And now that because many imports coming in paying high tariffs, so they will be translating into more higher costs for the wholesaler, the importers, and then it will be trickling down to the retailers. And guess what? Toward the end, it's all consumers are paying for it. Many small businesses, they are suffering the most. And since the cost of doing business is much higher, so even though people may be paying more, however, these businesses, they are not making more money at all.
On Monday, Trump said on his Truth Social site he would begin talks with countries who have requested meetings about tariffs, but not China, saying, quote, all talks with China concerning their requested meetings with us will be terminated. On Tuesday morning, Beijing hit back, vowing not to bow to blackmail from the United States, and that, quote, if the U.S. insists on having its way, China will fight to the end.
Hong Kong is vowing to diversify its trade relationships, citing ruthless U.S. tariffs as a major disruption to the global economy. The latest additional U.S. tariffs of 34% that were imposed on China also apply to Hong Kong, which is no longer considered a separate trading entity by Washington amid a years-long crackdown under a sweeping national security law.
The U.S. no longer adheres to free trade, arbitrarily undermining the internationally established rules of world trade, and its ruthless behavior damages global and multilateral trade.
Lee emphasized that the recent 34% U.S. tariffs, combined with earlier levies, have significantly impacted Hong Kong's trade. He says the city will strengthen ties with other regions, including Southeast Asia and the Middle East.
We shall sign more free trade agreements with countries and economies. Today, Hong Kong's FTA is already covering 20 economies. We're currently negotiating investment agreements with Saudi Arabia, Bangladesh, Egypt, and Peru. We will continue to push for Hong Kong's early accession to RCEP to deepen regional cooperation.
Japan's Prime Minister has made a direct appeal to President Trump, urging him to reconsider his unilateral tariff policies.
As you know, I spoke this morning with the Prime Minister of Japan, and we had a very good conversation. They're coming. And I said, one thing, you're going to have to open up your country, because we sold no cars, like 0 cars in Japan, and they sold millions of cars into our country. They don't really take our agriculture, a little bit of it just to keep us slightly happy, but they don't take what they're supposed to be taking. So we have a great relationship with Japan. We're going to keep it that way, but they're coming in to meet, and other countries are coming in.
In a 25-minute phone call, Prime Minister Ishiba Shigeru called on President Trump to pursue a win-win approach to trade instead of imposing unilateral tariffs. Ishiba stressed Japan's significant investment in the U.S., emphasizing that Japan has been the largest investor in the U.S. for the past 5 years.
私から大統領に対し、日本が5年連続で世界最大の対米投資国であると旨を述べつつ、アメリカの関税措置により日本企業の 投資余力が減退することを強く懸念していると。本日の首脳間のやり取りを踏まえまして、双方において担当閣僚を指名し、協議を続けていくということにいたしました。我が国といたしましては、こうした協議を通じて、アメリカ合衆国に対し、措置の見直しを強く求めていくものであります。
He expressed strong concerns that the U.S. tariff measures could discourage Japanese companies from further investing in the U.S. Meanwhile, Singapore's Prime Minister Lawrence Wong expressed disappointment over the U.S. decision to impose a 10% universal tariff rate. Speaking in Parliament, Wong emphasized that this move contradicts the global trading system the U.S. helped establish, straining the long-standing friendship between the two nations.
What the US is doing now is not reform. It is rejecting the very system it created. In Singapore's case, we have an FTA with America. We impose zero tariffs on US imports, and we actually run a trade deficit with the US, meaning we buy more from them than they do from us. If the tariffs were truly reciprocal, and if they were meant to target only those with trade surpluses, then the tariff for Singapore should be zero. But still, we are being subjected to the 10% tariff. We are very disappointed by the US move, especially considering the deep and long-standing friendship between our two countries. These are not actions one does to a friend. If other countries adopt the same approach as the US, the rules-based trading system will unravel. This will spell trouble for all nations, but smaller countries like Singapore will face greater pressures because small countries have limited bargaining power in one-on-one bilateral negotiations. So the major powers will dictate the terms, and we risk being marginalized and sidelined.
A U.S. analyst is calling President Trump's tariff policy the worst policy decision in a century. E.J. Gonzalez reports.
2 days after President Donald Trump announced his reciprocal tariffs on products imported to the United States, stocks continued to take a nosedive. Senior equity research analyst at Wedbush Securities, Dan Ives, says the tariff war has begun there and China is not just going to sit down.
The tariff war has begun. China's not just going to sit down. Ironically, this is the best that ever happened to China. China tech is going to steamroll ahead. U.S. tech is the one that continues to be hamstrung. And I think this is something where it's the worst policy mistake in 100 years.
The CBOE Volatility Index is an options-based gauge of stock investors' anxiety about the market's near-term outlook. On Friday, it rose as much as 15.54 points to a 45.56. This is its highest since August. Investors have been battered by a sharp sell-off this year, and they have been keeping an eye on the volatility gauge as an indicator of market stress. The S&P 500 is down about 11% for the year. Ives says the situation may not get better anytime soon.
It's an economic Armageddon that was unleashed by Trump, and the tariff war has begun, and we believe this could set tech stocks and the tech industry in the U.S. back potentially a decade, because the supply chain's built in Asia, and this is dramatic in terms of what it's going to do for growth, for cost, for I think many of these companies. And that's why it continues to be the most absurd thing I've seen on Wall Street covering stocks 25 years.
The Tariff Commission of the State Council issued an announcement to impose a 34% tariff on all imported goods originating from the United States.
Meanwhile, President Trump says the 34% tariff he is imposing on China is in fact a discounted rate.
That, China, first row, China, 67%. That's tariffs charged to the USA, including currency manipulation and trade barriers. So it's 67%, so we're going to be charging a discounted reciprocal tariff of 34%. I think, in other words, they charge us, we charge them less. So how can anybody be upset?
Ives warned that the formula used to come up with the reciprocal tariffs is problematic.
I mean, that formula is a formula that would have been laughed at in high school if you presented to your teacher. It's essentially a trade deficit morphed into a tariff percentage in some concocted number. And that's part of the problem. There's no credibility. And how do you even negotiate with a number that's so absurd?
He says the reciprocal tariff plan might just be the worst decision in the history of the U.S.
The market is pricing in an economic Armageddon. A recession is almost guaranteed based on this. And it's all self-inflicted. It will go down in history as one of the worst moves, ever to come out of D.C.
President Trump, however, stands firm that reciprocal tariffs on countries throughout the world simply means they do it to the U.S. and the U.S. does it to them. That he says is reciprocal. E.J. Gonzalez, Washington, D.C. for NET25 World News.
U.S. President Donald Trump says he thinks an end to the war in Gaza may be close. Now, Trump hosted Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu Monday at the White House. Thomas I. Likeness for more.
The two spoke about a number of issues, including the hostages, Syria, and an Iranian nuclear deal. Following the talks with Netanyahu, Trump told reporters he's optimistic about peace in the Middle East.
I'd like to see the war stop, and I think the war will stop at some point that won't be in the too distant future. Right now we have a problem with hostages. We're trying to get the hostages out. We got quite a few of them out, but it's a long process. It shouldn't be that long.
Netanyahu says he's committed to getting all of the hostages freed. And he says Israel's making another attempt to get a ceasefire deal.
We're working now on another deal that we hope will succeed. And we're committed to getting all the hostages out, but also eliminating the evil tyranny of Hamas in Gaza and enabling the people of Gaza to freely make a choice to go wherever they want.
Relocating the Palestinians is somewhat of a sticking point. Arab countries don't like the idea, and many Gazans want to remain there and rebuild the enclave. Despite that, encouraging them to leave is one of Trump's goals.
If you take the people, the Palestinians, and move them around to different countries, and you have plenty of countries that will do that, and you really have a freedom zone.
Globally, Trump's idea has been condemned as a proposal for ethnic cleansing, but Trump seems intent on the U.S. taking over Gaza and developing it.
Well, you know how I feel about the Gaza Strip. I think it's an incredible piece of important real estate, and I think it's something that we would be involved in, but having a peace force like the United States there, controlling and owning the Gaza Strip would be a good thing.
Israel's Netanyahu is also on board with Trump's vision, including the relocation of Palestinians in Gaza if they want to leave.
This is the right thing to do. If you give, it's going to take years to rebuild Gaza. In the meantime, people can have an option. The president has a vision. Countries are responding to that vision. We're working on it.
But for all of the talk at the White House on Monday, nothing has changed in the Middle East. In Israel, protesters doubt that the talks between Netanyahu and Trump will result in a deal to bring the remaining hostages home. And for the people of Gaza, the horror continues. Just this past Thursday, this little girl, she's just 6 years old. She lost her right arm.
كنت ألعب بالمرجحة انكسفت إيديا اتصابت بإيديا هذا انقطعت إيدي.
Peace can't come soon enough. Thomas I. Likeness, NET25 World News.
NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte has visited a Japanese self-defense forces base, emphasizing the importance of U.S. military support for the alliance.
One of the reasons I'm here, to really expand that relationship with the IP4 and now with the biggest IP4 partner, which clearly is Japan. So this is an important visit, and I'm really very glad that the US is sticking to that relationship with Japan. I think it's very important. And of course, we are worried about all these drills and all these military exercises. So we follow them very closely and are a worrying sign, clearly.
More than a week after a powerful 7.9 magnitude earthquake devastated central Myanmar, Mandalay, the hardest hit region, is showing signs of recovery, featuring business reopening and relocation of affected residents. Amid continued search and rescue operations, businesses are gradually reopening. A grocery store has seen doubling of customers since reopening on April 1. Essential supplies, including food, beverages, and personal care items, are largely back to pre-earthquake levels, with residents preferring necessities like toiletries and non-perishable foods such as bread and noodles. Other businesses such as fruit stands and barber shops are also welcoming customers back. Despite progress in continued search and rescue and business reopening, significant challenges remain for many residents. In a neighborhood west of Mandalay, dozens of homes were damaged, forcing residents to sleep outside and even seek new shelters due to recent thunderstorms.
The Chinese rescue teams are always on standby. Whenever there's any news, they will respond quickly. We are very grateful. Their arrival gives us hope. I want to show them our homes once they are rebuilt.
Canlaon volcano erupted explosively early Tuesday, sending a 4,000-meter ash plume southwest. FIVOX confirms pyroclastic density currents were observed. The eruption, which began at 5:51 a.m., has prompted authorities to maintain alert level 3, indicating a high risk of further eruptions. Back to the U.S., the Supreme Court has cleared the way for the Trump administration to deport alleged Venezuelan gang members using a rarely invoked 1798 law. However, the court's ruling comes with certain limitations. Take a look.
The U.S. Supreme Court on Monday allowed Donald Trump to pursue deportations of alleged Venezuelan gang members using a law dating back to 1798 with certain limits. Trump invoked the Alien Enemies Act on March 15th to swiftly deport the alleged members of the Tren de Aragua gang. The law has historically been used only in wartime and is best known for its use to intern Japanese, Italian, and German immigrants during World War II. The same day, a Washington-based judge blocked the deportations, but Trump's administration allowed 2 planes already in the air to continue to El Salvador to be placed in the Central American country's terrorism confinement center. The administration has argued the judge had encroached on presidential authority to make national security decisions. On Monday, the Supreme Court granted the administration's request to lift the judge's order in an unsigned 5-4 ruling in which conservative Justice Amy Coney Barrett and the court's 3 liberal justices dissented. However, the court's majority placed the limits on how deportations may occur and emphasized that judicial review is required. The majority wrote that detainees, quote, must receive notice after the date of this order that they are subject to removal under the Act, and that, quote, the notice must be afforded within a reasonable time and in such a manner as will allow them to actually seek habeas relief in the proper venue before such removal occurs. The ruling said the court was not resolving the validity of the administration's reliance on the law to carry out the deportations. The dissenting justices, in an opinion written by liberal Justice Sonia Sotomayor, criticized the majority's, quote, dubious conclusions in the case and for acting with just a few days of deliberation. Lee Gallant, a lawyer with the American Civil Liberties Union and the lead counsel representing the detainees, framed the court's decision as a win for his side, saying, quote, the critical point is that the Supreme Court said individuals must be given due process to challenge their removal under the Alien Enemies Act. That is an important victory.
The streets of Madrid and dozens of other Spanish cities were filled with protesters demanding action on the country's deepening housing crisis. Beverly Madrid reports from Spain.
Good evening, Alma. Yes, in Madrid, amidst a sea of protesters, it's part of a nationwide movement. Hundreds of thousands have taken to the streets in over 40 Spanish cities today, demanding urgent action to address the country's soaring rents and severe housing shortage. Listen to the chants. No matter who governs, we must defend housing rights. The frustration is palpable. Activists say Spain's economic growth, while impressive, is leaving ordinary citizens behind, struggling to find affordable homes. Numbers paint a stark picture. According to property website Idealista, average rents have doubled and house prices have surged by 44% in the last decade, far outpacing wage growth. And since the 2020 pandemic, the supply of rental properties has halved.
He venido porque es necesario, ¿no?
I came because we tenants need to be listened to, and it is good to fight a little bit against what all landlords in general are doing with the use they are making of their housing.
Con la vivienda, ¿no? El uso que están haciendo de su vivienda.
This is a common story. The rise of short-term rentals fueled by Spain's record-breaking tourism boom. 94 million tourists this year alone is squeezing long-term residents out of their neighborhoods.
Because I am also a tourist and I have been traveling around the world. Tourism is indeed good, but it is also good to protect the people who live in these places.
Spain's success in attracting tourists and migrants, while beneficial for the economy, has exacerbated the housing crisis. The Bank of Spain estimates a housing deficit of 500,000 homes. Adding to the problem is the slow pace of new construction. Only about 120,000 new homes are built annually, a fraction of pre-2008 levels. Homeowners associations and experts argue that current regulations discourage long-term rentals, making short-term rentals more profitable. The government faces a difficult balancing act, maintaining economic growth while ensuring housing affordability. The question is, can they find a solution before this crisis deepens? Reporting from Spain, this is Beverly Madrid for NET25 World News. Back to you, Alma.
And the news continues here on NET25. We'll be right back. And cinemas are facing a tough battle against streaming services and a shaky economy, even as they look to big budget originals like the Brad Pitt racing film to turn things around. Take a look.
As the summer season approaches, Hollywood is hoping its lineup of blockbusters will give the industry a much-needed boost. Ticket sales in the United States and Canada are running 11% behind the same point last year, according to ComScore data, and remain below pre-pandemic levels. Here's ComScore's senior movie analyst, Paul DeGarabedian.
You're literally in that 18 weeks of summer, that accounts for 40% of the domestic full-year box office. So it's a vitally important time for theaters.
Cinemas face competition from at-home streaming services such as Netflix, but it's hoped the Formula One movie, F1, scheduled for June and starring Brad Pitt, will mirror the $1.5 billion success of Top Gun Maverick in the summer of 2022.
What audiences seem to want is the familiar, even though a lot of people decry the lack of originality. I mean, really you have to look far and wide to find one, but F1, the Formula One movie with Brad Pitt, directed by Joe Kosinski, who directed Top Gun Maverick, that for me is like an original IP blockbuster in the making. So that's really cool, and in IMAX.
This team can be the heroes.
Walt Disney's Marvel Studios' Thunderbolts, starring Florence Pugh, will kick off the season in May, and Marvel will follow up with the Fantastic Four First Steps in July.
This island was the research facility for the original Jurassic Park.
An old favourite will be revisited as Scarlett Johansson stars alongside Jonathan Bailey in Universal Pictures' Jurassic World Rebirth.
We ready?
Adding to the star power, one of cinema's biggest champions, Tom Cruise, teased Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning, the film that may be his last in the action franchise.
We gotta rescue Papa!
Family films have been some of the top performers in recent years, with a new Smurfs and a live-action remake of How to Train Your Dragon set to take to screens. Cinema operators welcomed the full schedule after disruptions from the pandemic and the 2023 Hollywood strikes. However, Republican US President Donald Trump's tariffs have sparked fears of a global economic downturn and could prove a challenge, as CEO of Cinema United Michael O'Leary explains.
We're an industry which thrives on people having discretionary income. So they will take their discretionary income and they'll go to the movies, they'll go to dinner and they'll go to the movies. And so when there's uncertainty in the economic markets for any reason, people tend to not use that discretionary income as much as they otherwise would.
And with that, we have tonight's broadcast. For everyone here on NET25, I'm Alma Angeles. Thank you all for joining us. Good night.